Last week, we attended a hearing in the Daybell Vallow murder trial. In this hearing, we heard an interesting name mentioned. It was from the defense of Lori. They talked about a Dr. Michael Welner that they wanted to talk a little more about and perhaps object to being used as an expert witness. A little bit more digging brought some very interesting facts up about Mr. Welner. In this episode, we share more of what we learned about Dr. Wellner and what we think the prosecution might be using him to help them establish. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the True Crime Squad. This is Katie Weaver. I'm here with my sister, co-host, and partner in crime, Kristi Brower. Hello.
Hello. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday.
Yes, it is Monday. Happy Monday, squad. Hope you had a good weekend.
Right?
Yeah.
We're recording this before the Super Bowl, so we don't know who won.
No.
Also, I don't care, but whatever. I know a lot of people do.
Yeah, we don't. We don't. It's interesting. I have a prediction, but maybe I won't say it. I don't know.
Do you dare say it?
Well, I hate to bet against my team because I really like Kansas City. I love Mahomes. I think he's the coolest guy. But I kind of think the Eagles want it more. They feel more hungry to me than Kansas City does. But maybe they'll prove me wrong. But that's how I'm feeling.
There you go. We'll see tomorrow, won't we?
We'll see. We'll know.
Later today, yeah.
Yep, we'll know. Also, Mahomes has been hurt, and I just don't know. I feel like there's some holes there in Kansas City that might be fatal, and the Eagles have been so hot. We'll see. We will see.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, we have, I think, a very interesting episode put together for you guys today.
We really do.
Not our typical reporting on a crime, but instead talking about this forensic psychologist that you guys are going to love, Michael Welner. So, but before that, I'm going to kick the mic over to you for our first portion of the show, which is an MMIW.
Yes. Sometimes these cases, missing and murdered Indigenous women, hit close to home, and this one has.
Yeah.
We have a 24-year-old woman that was killed on the Fort Hall Reservation on Thursday. The body was discovered just before noon. She was found in an outbuilding near a home. There was a woman that just happened to go, or a person that went into that outbuilding and happened to find her body. She's been identified as 24-year-old Hailey Smith. We don't know very much about what's happening. We do know that her death, however, is actually being investigated by the FBI, Fort Hall Police, and the Bingham County Coroner's Office, which I have to say is quite a bit more cooperation than we have seen in a while.
It is.
Of these cases in our community. I'm surprised that the FBI is already involved. We have talked a lot about a woman named Rebecca Plentywounds who was murdered in 2018.
I was going to say 17, somewhere right in there.
Somewhere who was found dismembered on the reservation. Her case has never even been deemed a murder so that it could be investigated. So we've been keeping a close eye on what's happening on Fort Hall because it's near us and because we want to bring as much attention to these cases as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So there is an autopsy pending and there is actual law enforcement action on this woman's death. I will tell you, I'm not 100% sure that she is Indigenous. We don't even know. We know that she died on the reservation. That's what
she is. I was able to finally track her down on social media. Yeah, she's Indigenous.
Okay.
Yeah.
And either way, I think any woman that gets killed on a reservation, we need to be really looking into what the hell is going on because we know what's going on, which is really, really bad shit.
Yep.
So we're going to keep an eye on Hailey's case and we will keep you updated. All the love to her family and her friends. And I just have to say that I have at least some gratitude that there is actual law enforcement action happening in her death.
Yeah.
It's sad to have to say that, but it's true.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, not a lot to share, but a little, and I'm sure, fingers crossed, there will be more. I will tell you that our local news reported on it. A couple of years ago, I may have wrote them a scathing email about how they never cover cases
Yeah.
like this on our local reservation, and actually tried to collaborate with them to do a story on it, which they did not do.
Mm-hmm.
However, they're reporting on it. Methinks
Yeah.
maybe speaking up did a little good. So think about that in your own community. If you notice that your local news is not covering these cases,
Yep.
get
Yep.
on for it. Get
That's
on for it.
your news is going to run stories that they think people are interested in.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you just from our own micro experience here in the podcasting world that our cases about MMIW get significantly less watches and listens
Yeah.
than other cases. It's
Yeah.
very disheartening. And so I see why the news doesn't jump to run these stories because people don't actually act like they care.
Right.
So do care, please, and do tell your news that you care and that you
Right.
want to hear these stories and that they need to be told.
Well, and news reporting on a case like this creates pressure for law enforcement.
Yep,
If nobody's talking about it, then nobody knows if law enforcement isn't doing anything.
yep.
If the news media is like, okay, we need updates. What's happening? What are your findings
Hmm.
here? That creates the pressure that we need to keep law enforcement on their toes.
Hmm.
So this is a good move. I mean, I'm very sad for Hailey and her family.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I am grateful that we're seeing some news on it. The Idaho Statesman also did an article, so I was pretty impressed that we had a local
Hmm.
newspaper and a local news station do it.
Yes,
And we will keep you updated.
absolutely.
And with that, Katie, I'm going to kick the mic back to you for our main case.
Okay. Probably one of the most pressing and controversial questions people have had in the Daybell Vallow murders is were this just two horny idiots having an affair that wanted money that's really what this was? Or did these two really believe their prophecies? Did they really believe that they were gods and goddesses and that they were supposed to be restoring the earth and all of that stuff? Did they really believe it? That's
They
one of
believe
the
the
things.
kids were zombies.
Yes, did they believe the kids were zombies? Uh, did they really believe that, or did they use these beliefs as an excuse to commit their crimes? And I
Mm-hmm.
know you guys have all had very strong opinions about whether you think that's true or that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the prosecution wants to answer that question too.
Yeah.
They want to answer that question for the jury. And so when we were in court last week, one name was mentioned. There was actually a list of potential witnesses that the defense on Lori's side wanted to argue about.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the prosecution and the judge were like, it's way too soon to even be talking about this. And this witness might not even be introduced until penalty phase anyway. And like, it's too soon. But only
Right.
one name was actually brought up.
Yeah.
And that name was Michael Welner. I hadn't
Mm-hmm.
heard that name before, but I made a note
Mm-hmm.
and ran to the Google and learned a little bit more about Michael Welner. Well, let me tell you who he is. Michael Welner is a forensic psychiatrist. He's the chairman of the forensic panel. He is well known for work in sensitive and complex litigation. He has led forensic psychiatric examinations of numerous big cases. And he has specialized in cases involving the Mormon church
Yeah.
because he was the final expert witness in the Elizabeth Smart kidnappings, which is really, really interesting. And I'm
Yeah.
going to circle back to that, but I want to tell you a few of the other cases that he has been a part of. Of course, Brian David Mitchell, that's the Elizabeth Smart kidnapper.
Mm-hmm.
His specialty was sect psychology and brainwashing. One of his specialties is polygamy and cult psychology. Yeah. I won't tell you all of them, but some of them that you might find interesting. Andrea Yates,
Mm.
Damon Thibodeau,
Mm. I don't know who that is.
Omar Kadir, that's the specialty of terrorism and war.
Mm-hmm.
He has pioneered research to for courts and juries in order to present to courts and juries to help them to define heinous, depraved, and evil crimes in sentencing determinations.
Wow.
Really interesting stuff. He's
Mm.
done really interesting work. He is also a contributor to ABC. He is involved in their Law and Justice Unit. He has been on Good Morning America a lot of times and 2020. He's a regular contributor to CNN, Larry King Live. He's been on Fox News, Good Morning America, or Morning in America, The Dr. Oz Show, and other shows. He has written several publications. Like, we're not messing around. This guy is very, very well respected and well spoken.
Yeah. I
So,
I'm super excited about Michael Welner. I hope we get to hear from him on this case.
me too. So, one thing I learned from him is that because of his work, that working with Brian David Mitchell, he put out some work about this is a paper called New Research Reveals Secrets About Psychology of Polygamous Sects and Their Leaders. And
Mm.
he did a big study on polygamy and the leaders of polygamous sects and how they get their followers and what the psychology of their they are and their psychology or their followers are. It's very interesting work. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, but I wanted to take you into the courtroom for a few minutes into David Michael. Oh Lord, sorry,
Mitchell.
David Brian David Mitchell. Okay,
Right. Yeah.
Brian, Brian David Mitchell's case. So last witness, and what we learned from this case was really, really interesting. What we learned from him was really interesting. So his biggest takeaway was that Mitchell was not mentally ill.
Interesting.
Well, people really wanted to believe that. In fact, he was found unfit to stand trial for a certain amount of time.
Right.
Uh, he found that he was antisocial and a narcissist, but not suffering from any severe mental defect.
Wow.
He said he's a pedophile, and that has to be front and center. He has no remorse for what he has done to Elizabeth Smart.
Wow.
Trying to get this guy on trial was an 8-year event because of his supposed mental health issues. And,
Right.
and I know you guys that are very familiar with the Daybell Vallow case are, your ears are pricked right now because of what we know about Lori and her stint
Mm-hmm.
in the mental hospital and just all of this stuff that we have seen so far. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the transcripts because I want you to just think about what this case looks like in relation to Chad and Lori.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of the sentencing or of the of the testimony, I'm not going to go completely through. It's kind of boring. Just talking about his professional qualifications,
Oh.
of
Okay.
which there are many.
Mm-hmm.
This question from the prosecutor, though, her name was Prosecutor Hagen. She asked, "How many people charged with major crimes have you evaluated?" He said, "Several hundred at this point." Prosecutor Hagen asks, "How many in relation to legal insanity?" And he indicates 40 to 50, probably closer to 40.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting. Of several hundred criminals he's evaluated, only 40 to 50 did he find actually legally insane.
It's because it's actually real rare.
Yeah.
Most of the time, even if you are mentally ill, you're not so insane that you can't be held accountable.
hmm The prosecutor asked if that's standard, and he said yes. Yeah. So let me scroll down a little bit here. The transcripts are very long, but I think that some of them are really worthwhile. Okay. He's paid hourly. At this time, and this was in 2009, he was charging $550 per hour. He charges the U.S. government $425 because, because it's the government. They have a
He gives them a discount.
yeah. He gives them a discounted rate. Yeah.
That's cool.
So he also said that his office turns down most of the cases that come in because they just can't take them all. He said we take complex and highly sensitive cases. So if he's signed on to be an expert witness in this case, he chose this case basically because he
Well,
doesn't
and
do them all.
I don't know that they have that yet. From what the prosecution said, is that they
Hmm.
intend to have someone
Hmm.
to discuss hyper religiosity, but
Yes,
that it would be premature to say who.
yes, hyper
So,
religiosity and whether or not someone commits a crime and just blames it on religion to justify the crime. Yeah,
right, versus they actually believe it.
yeah, pretty interesting. So he was brought in on this case in 2008, and he started working on it. He said in a very limited matter at that time. At that time, he said he had put in 1,600 hours of work on this case. 1,600 hours of work. It's estimated that he billed over $600,000 for his work and testimony on that case.
Yeah, wow.
Imagine what that looks like for Fremont County, Madison County. And of
Well,
course,
yeah, because we're talking about two defendants here.
if Dr. Wellner ends up not testifying, someone else will, and this is the kind of work they will have done. So that's why I think
Right.
it's really important to it's an interesting to hear about it a little bit.
Well, and it makes sense to look at Wellner. I mean, he has a lot of experience with their background.
Yep.
Obviously,
Yeah,
not polygamy, but, Mormonism in general.
Mormonism. Yes. So I want to read a little bit of the beginning of their conversation. Prosecutor Hagen, what is your professional opinion on Mitchell having a severe mental defect? Wellner, it is my professional opinion he did not. Hagen, how do you go about determining that? Wellner says, there is no question, if there's no question of financial issues, you do what you can to track email and IM and Facebook. You track evidence as evidence dictates, and then you search by necessity. One myth about evidence is that it is there like low hanging fruit. You don't learn that until you actively search. Hagen said, has the jury heard from the people you talked to? He said, the jury has heard from a number of those witnesses. She said, how did you start investigating? And he said, I started by reading police reports. I picked up the book of Emmanuel David Isaiah. That's the book that this guy wrote,
Hmm.
the defendant wrote.
Right.
And I said, stop. No, I had to stop. Hagen said, why was that? Wellner, I had a nagging feeling. I didn't feel I would have the qualification to go forward on the case until I learned more about the Mormon culture and Joseph Smith and how it relates to Mormon theology, because I couldn't define the boundary of faith and not faith. Included in
Mm-hmm.
that, I needed to have a better understanding of polygamy and the history of it and what happened to it. It also became clear to me that I needed to have an understanding of schismatic fundamentalist polygamist beliefs because that became the terrain of this case. So he stopped everything he was doing right there and did a deep dive into Mormonism and polygamy. And that's actually resulted in a big body of work from him
Mm-hmm.
because of those things. But he knew that he was going to have to really understand where this guy's head could have been before he really went forward, which I found interesting. Uh, Hagen asked, did you feel you had an accurate and complete picture of the defendant himself? Wellner said, oh no, but to be fair to the defendant, I wouldn't have known initially either. Your objective over the course of evaluating is to diminish the gray and find as much clarity as possible. It would be my professional Sherpa to defining this case. She asked, did you identify additional sources of documentation? And he indicated that he did. Now, this I think is very interesting. She said, "Did you contact a number of sources yourself?" We're talking about the psychiatrist, right? He
Mm-hmm.
says, "Yes." She said, "Is that typical?" And Wellner said, "I do it all the time." Third party interviews is what distinguishes clinical psychiatry from forensic psychiatry. It puts a
Mm-hmm.
requirement that you have a good feeling on the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. You think you have the whole story and you pause. The defense objected to hearsay because he quoted Paul Harvey. The judge,
that was that's dumb.
yeah, the judge overruled. So now listen to some of this data. She asked how many police investigative reports he reviewed in this case. He said
Mm-hmm.
20. How many interview transcripts and videotapes? 6. Personal papers of the accused and Ms. Barzee? 12. How did you treat those sources? He said, as scripture that was designed to be spiritual and self affirming. Their papers.
Mm-hmm.
She said, did you take those at face value? And he said, I did not. She said, if they were taken at face value, could that compromise the investigation? And Wellner said, oh, absolutely. My point being that as I have read scriptures, I have come to appreciate, and they have been written to be an homage to God. It shapes that position. In certain instances, it may be deserved. If you fall down the rabbit hole of relying on scripture for reality, you have been led astray and you don't know where. Hear that again. If you fall down the rabbit hole of relying on scripture for reality, you have been led astray and you don't know where.
Yeah.
Chad and Lori, anybody?
Yeah.
Uh,
That is
she asked if he
wow.
read reports from other examiners. He did, 17 of them. He read their records to marriage and family relations, really studied their family trees. His criminal records, of course, the court documents. When he read through the Utah State Hospital chart, he identified workers that he wanted to speak to, and he interviewed a whole bunch of them. And not just the doctor, he interviewed anyone who would have had contact with him
Mm-hmm.
to get their take. He said that it's important to fill in the gaps of the story by talking to everyone who may have had any connection to it, which I thought
Sure.
was pretty fascinating. His work, I think, is really
Well, yeah,
fascinating.
because he doesn't just go with the professional's opinion.
Right.
He
And he
goes
is a professional.
deeper.
Isn't that
Mm-hmm.
interesting?
That is interesting.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really interesting. He reviewed 18 post arrest records, 13 or 3 records related to Wanda Barzee, 4 media transcripts. He also interviewed Elizabeth Smart. And they asked why he interviewed Elizabeth, and he said he spent 5 hours with Elizabeth, and it was the most enlightening interview that he did because Elizabeth had a whole glimpse of the defendant when he was at his most vulnerable. Just in day to day life, just trying
Sure.
to live, trying to eat, trying to survive. When he maybe wasn't trying to be the prophet, the thing, but just a human trying to survive. And he said
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely the most enlightening part of any of his interviews, is what he learned from Elizabeth.
Wow.
Did you also know that in order to testify in that trial, she had to come home from her mission for a little while?
No, I
She was
didn't.
in Paris serving a mission for the LDS Church when
I
this
didn't
finally
know
went to
that.
trial. I didn't
Wow.
either. Was really surprised to hear that, actually. Yeah. So, at any rate, he interviewed 58 people, one of which was Brian David Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
And that is freaking fascinating. So, if you guys remember this case at all, every day when court would start, Mitchell would start blaring hymns, singing hymns at the top of his lungs until he'd have to be removed from the courtroom every
Yeah.
day. And this day was no different. Well, when he went to interview Mitchell and sat down with him, he immediately just started blasting out hymns, blaring over him, just singing away.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay. He said, that's fine. He's like, I'm here to work. So I guess if you're going to sing, I'm going to work. So he just pulled his laptop out and sat basically in silence. He said pretty soon he finally got silent. but sat in silence with him for a long time until but anytime he would try and bring up a question or something for him, he would either turn his back to him or dip his head down and refuse to look at him or start singing again. And
Mm.
so it was going nowhere. They sat in that kind of a space for more than 3 hours.
Wow.
Sorry, dog's barking. I think the pizza just got here for the
Oh.
Super Bowl. Anyway, so what he decided to do is to pull up his videotape of his interview with Elizabeth. He said frequently a part of his process is to show various people what
Mm-hmm.
somebody else said to see what they do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the singing was gone.
I'll bet.
No more singing. He watched it. Sometimes he would try to act like he wasn't listening or wasn't watching, but mostly he watched. He said he never spoke, but the one thing that he did is that he leaned in towards the TV and had the markers of someone who is aroused when Elizabeth was on the screen.
Gross.
Hmm.
Ugh. Jesus
Yep.
Christ.
And he said that really was all he really needed to know,
Mm-hmm.
but he said that really, Mitchell left that interview thinking that he did an awesome job because
He
he
beat the
didn't say
guy.
anything. Yep. But he said he didn't need to say anything. He showed him.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really interesting. So, and they did show in court a long videotape of that interaction. So he also talked to two other forensic psychologists and asked for their professional take on his case and what he was learning, and
Mm-hmm.
took some input from both of them, which I also thought was really interesting. He is really lacking in ego. I would say he has charisma and he has confidence, but he's really lacking in ego, which I think is really important
And
to be able,
unusual
and
for a
unusual.
psychiatrist.
Yeah, but really important to be able to do this work, successfully.
Yeah.
So then they talked about his false beliefs. The other doctors believed that he was delusional, uh, but they did not believe that he suffered from severe mental illness. When the
Mm-hmm.
prosecutor asked were his ideas fixed, meaning were they set in stone, he said
Mm-hmm.
no, they weren't. So his ideas did change with the weather, did change with what was happening around him, which is a really important thing to be able to prove, because
Yeah.
that means that today I say the sky is blue, but maybe tomorrow I'm going to say the sky is gray. It's not always the same.
No, which means that you aren't just acting out of straight blind belief.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yep. Yep. Interesting. Of course, it goes on and on and on. And they talk quite a bit about religious belief, about Mormon religious belief. I thought this little piece was really interesting. Dr. or a prof- Prosecutor Hagen said, on top of the question of whether his beliefs were fixed or false, now the jury has understood the role of the DSM, that's the diagnostic tools, and diagnosis for the conclusion. Are there any other published research that has dealt with how to find out if someone is having delusion related to religion? Delusion related to religion.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what Wellner says: there is no public medical record at all where you can look at beliefs native to the LDS and determinations a psychiatrist can make about whether it is delusional or not. That
Right.
does not exist for the fundamentalist LDS communities. Isn't that interesting? There's
Mm-hmm.
no diagnostic tool. And actually, it sounds like in religion in general, for the most part, that
There isn't.
religion gets a pass. So you could have the craziest religious beliefs on the planet, and there's some space in our medical communities and our society to respect those because it's religious.
Right.
And to me,
And that's really
that's,
just a conscious choice that's been made in mental health,
yeah,
not so much
a truth. Yeah.
a truth. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Which to me, I thought was very interesting because certainly we've seen Lori and Chad exploit their belief and expand upon their belief.
Yeah. A lot.
And also, their beliefs were definitely not fixed
Yeah.
because they violated their own religion over and over again.
They sure did.
I think I'll stop there with this transcript, but I just thought all of that was really interesting
Super
and really
interesting.
interesting to kind of understanding where could this go with Lori and with Chad. So, say Dr. Weller does end up, advising on this case. He's going to interview Lori and Chad, clearly,
Hmm.
but he will likely interview many other people. He
Yeah.
could interview people at the jail that they've had contact with.
Hmm.
He could interview family members. He could interview friends. He could interview church leaders. There's a
People
lot
at
of
the state
places he
hospital.
could go. Yep, how the employees at the state hospital. There's a lot of different ways this could go. He could interview the other doctors that have already done assessments on Lori and maybe on Chad, because it sounds like maybe that's happened. There's something happening with Chad's mental health stuff right now.
Hmm.
Um, and then potentially he could get on the stand and tell us whether he believes that either of them were delusional, either of them are truly mentally ill, if either of them were using religion as a crutch to be able to commit their crimes, or whether they actually fully believed what they were saying and what they were doing.
Yeah.
And again, I know you all have opinions about that, and I'm sure you'll tell us, and that's fine. Have an opinion. Absolutely. This case is so complex and
It
such a
is.
rabbit hole. There's so many things to consider, and it has changed all of our minds a few times, I think, throughout the course of it too. Just different behaviors and things that we've learned. And Dr. Weller will definitely be one of those if we see him on the stand. So there you have it. That's Dr. Weller. Very interesting stuff.
Isn't it Wellner?
Wellner, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yep.
Very interesting. Wow. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
And to see it compared, to see what he did in the Elizabeth Smart case and to look at the similarities. We did a comparison
we did.
between Brian David Mitchell and
And
Lori
Chad. Yeah.
and Chad. Yeah. And already, because
Yeah.
we see it, we would
Mhm.
see it more probably than other people just because we are ex-Mormons ourselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's powerful. This trial is going to be something, I'll tell you.
That is fascinating stuff. But here's the thing. I can't imagine that they have to have already brought Dr. Wellner on. This is supposed to go to trial in April. He spent 18 months preparing for this
Right?
last one. 18 months. He did 1,600 hours of work on it. There's no way, if they have brought him on as an expert witness, that he's not already deep into his discovery here. There's no
That's a
way.
good point. That's a really good point.
But I don't know why he wouldn't take this case. It seems right in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, it really does.
So,
And it is very complex, and he obviously likes the complex stuff. And if
mhm.
he's already done all this Mormon work, this case would be easier for him probably than Elizabeth Smart.
Uh-huh. And probably just makes him a little more of a credible uh, witness because he already has such a good background in these
I'm sure
cases.
it's why
So
they went to him to begin with.
surely, yeah. Yep. So there you go. Well, with that, Kristi, I'm going to kick
Wow.
the mic back over to you for our last segment, and I believe it's an MMIW.
No, it's some
No, it's a
WTF
WTF.
news.
Yes.
So let me just paint a little picture for you. This could have been a Florida man. This could have been a lot of things, but let's just picture this, and I'll show you a picture in a minute. But a woman in Covington, Louisiana, she was a Florida woman. But I think this happened in Louisiana. She was arrested because she was carrying a blowtorch, which,
Oh, like
yeah,
lit? A lit blowtorch?
yeah, which
Like he was just blowtorching. Okay.
got into a pursuit on the highway with law enforcement with her blowtorch while driving this bus. Now it says sex trafficking awareness
Oh
beside it,
gosh. Okay.
which I mean, I am appreciative of because we definitely need more awareness around sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
This happened on February 7th, and this was at about 6 o'clock in the morning. She went into a gas station. Her name is Natalie. I'm not going to give her whole name because I'm not sure that this is a stable person. She went into a gas station wielding a blowtorch and said she was looking for the local Department of Children and Family Services office.
Oh, dear God. Okay.
Tell me where they are. I guess. So, of course, the employees of the gas station, they call the police because they're like,
weird. Yeah, like you do.
what the hell?
Okay.
So they said, there's this woman, she has a blowtorch and she's driving a school bus that says sex trafficking awareness and she's just threatened us and, So they find the
You mean
bus
they don't
on.
like blowtorches being brought right into their business like that, eh?
No, as a matter of fact, they don't. They found her on Highway 190 near a Walmart and they engaged in pursuit. Which, can you imagine the visual on that? So the bus, she crashes the bus into a fence at St. Scholastica Academy.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately, she's near a school with her blowtorch.
And
But
her
the police,
crazy bus. Okay.
yeah, but the police did take her into custody there. There was really no damage to anybody and there were no injuries. Thank heavens.
Good.
Apparently they think she was living at a state park and has been living in the bus. And there was a man who was living with her and he had been arrested recently on domestic violence charges. So she was just kind of out in the world on her own, just her and her blowtorch.
Oh gosh, trying to carry out some kind of mission.
I guess, yeah. So they charged her with flight from an officer, hit and run, simple criminal damage to property, reckless operation of a motor vehicle, aggravated obstruction of highway commerce, terrorizing and carrying a firearm or dangerous weapon near students.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So
do we think she was trying to torch the Department of Family Services?
Right? What's the
there's a
connection?
big school of thought right now that in certain circles that the DCFS is just a big child sex trafficking ring.
Right. Which
that we don't believe that. We're just sharing that. That is a conspiracy theory that's
every child and family protection program is a state-run organization. They are not linked to each other. Each state is a separate organization. So, I think some of those things happen in the foster care programs? Yeah. But is it a national conspiracy? No, because there is no conspiracy. They don't. I will tell you from my own experience that these agencies work terribly together between states. Rarely is it a good thing. So they're not.
Yeah, we've seen that a few times with kids that just kind of got lost in the system from one state to another and disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully Natalie gets the help that she needs. I hope they confiscated the blowtorch. It was a little wild, let's just say.
But does it also make you wonder if it's possible that that particular agency had maybe at some point taken her children, or that maybe she had history with them specifically?
Yeah, I do wonder.
I'm really glad she didn't make it to them with the blowtorch because that really worries me about what she was thinking about doing.
Yes, me too. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely a concern. But clearly a person who has not been safe.
Yeah.
And fortunately, hopefully they'll be able to get her some safety and maybe keep her away from the abusive guy too. I don't know, but
for sure. Wow, that's interesting. Really interesting. Well, we're seeing more and more of people who have bought into dangerous theories, conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Creating violence or trying to create violence on various government entities and other innocents that
right.
Even know what they're talking about. People shooting up hospitals and various things. Dangerous beliefs that have been fed and they believed.
Yeah.
Vulnerable people.
Most definitely.
Interesting. All right. Well, there you have it. I told you this episode would be interesting. It just got more interesting than I even knew. So
yes, it did.
Well, thank you. Well, this is Monday, so we'll be back on Tuesday with a brand new case. Episode. We'll be back Wednesday with a brand new episode, and then let's see. Is it? Yeah, it would be. I believe it is the cold read party this week.
Oh yes. Okay.
Yeah. This month is the way the days fall is a little.
Oh yes,
everything's happening
first
soon.
Wednesday. So yeah, it would be.
Yeah, so the cold read party will happen right after the live stream, Case Updates live stream on Wednesday night. So yeah,
Yep.
lots of big content to come this week. Lots of good stuff. If you missed it, we did do a live stream on Thursday about our experiences in Daybell Vallow Court. And
Yes.
so if you haven't seen that, run back and find it. Some pretty interesting things happen.
It was
You
an
know, like
interesting day.
Dr. Wellner, but other things
Yes.
too. So yeah, go check it out. Alrighty. Well, as always, like, share, follow, do the thing. We appreciate you guys very much. Go do something good for yourselves. You sure enough deserve it. And have a good day. This has been yet
And
another production of the True Crime Squad.
go sports ball.